advice could you give developers coming into the space right now? His answer was really on point. We really agree with it. It's really difficult to get started, especially if you're not sure what you want to do. If you want to be an application developer or a protocol developer, it's very difficult to come in and realize how can I start to add value immediately. So because of this, this is a problem that resonates with us, and that's why we created CoinMesh. And basically what CoinMesh is it automates setting up your Bitcoin and Litecoin nodes, and it does it within minutes, as opposed to normally how long it takes to learn and set up your node and be able to query it and things like that can take weeks or even months. And a lot of times when you do this, a developer runs into a lot of problems with different tooling that's available, and it can become really difficult. It can be very cumbersome. And so that's one of the things that we do. And we do that by providing a data source, which is the node. And we don't really care what kind of node you want to run. If you want to run Litecoin D, if you want to run Bitcoin D, BTC-D, any of the other flavors, we support that. We think that the developer should be able to make those choices. And they shouldn't be locked in long-term with those choices either. And the way that we do that is we provide an adapter layer on top of those implementations that has a common API. So what it means to a developer is they can develop against one set of APIs, and then if they choose to change the coin, or if they choose to change their implementation, or even scale out, if their application sees a lot of growth, they should be able to easily scale out. And that's what we do at the bottom two layers. We also provide some instruction on how you can build out an application built on top of these blockchains that really does make it easier to build these features on top of it. Next. And so the way that we do that, one way is through a development environment, and that's an open source, we call it CoinMesh IDE right now. It's basically a UI for building these applications out. And as you go through it, you go through these steps, you make choices such as which implementation you want to use, some basic services that are available from the open source community. You choose that, and then at the end, when you click create, you get presented with your project. And it doesn't look like much here, right? We're not showing off an actual project built with CoinMesh. We're showing how easy it is to get started and to build on top of these Litecoin and Bitcoin blockchains. So when you have your application, one of the things you want to do is you want to add features. For example, we talked earlier about open timestamps and how that can be a really helpful part of an application. We want to have an ecosystem of community members who are building these kind of micro libraries that allow developers to come in and use open timestamps, for instance, in their application. And what that does is it allows you to start building today, to build early, to get in front of customers, and to iterate fast. You don't have to spend development time and resources to go out and understand how all the technology works, and then also be able to build, understand all the different technology that you want to incorporate. And so here's an example of mounting a shared project. So basically a project is a set of these open source libraries that you've brought together, you're building it, and you want to share it with other developers. Say you start to have more demand, so you want to bring somebody else on board. And we kind of put together a little video that shows you how easy it is. Within about a minute here, you can go in. It's kind of hard to see with the lighting, but basically he's selecting a project directory. This project gets mounted, and the developer can go click one button, and now they're running the exact same application in another area. So this can be done to run in production, or as we're seeing here, in a development environment. So another developer has come on, clicked a few buttons, downloaded some repositories, and now they're up to building this very easy sample wallet application. So it doesn't look like much, but what do you get out of this? Well, everyone needs to have some basic wallet functionalities included in their application. Most people do, at least. And so this gives you a starting point for that.
So why CoinMesh? Why are we open sourcing this platform that automates Litecoin and Bitcoin nodes? Well, it's because we believe in Litecoin and we believe in a world of sound money, and we want to inspire developers to build on top of Litecoin and Bitcoin. And one of the reasons is because we want to cultivate the next financial renaissance that we believe is coming through Litecoin and Bitcoin. And so what does this world look like? Like for us, it's building a world where the foundations is a pull system and not, a push system and not a pull system. That means people spend money that they have rather than relying on credit or loans or getting into debt to buy things that they can't afford. And so it's teaching people to be fiscally responsible. Another aspect of a world on sound money is that anybody in this world can access this financial network. Whether you are a millionaire, whether you're a homeless person, as long as you have a crypto wallet, you're set, you're good to go. You can use this network. And then finally, it's the idea that your transactions cannot be censored. Nobody's going to shut down your bank. Nobody's going to say, hey, you shouldn't spend your money at this location or for this service. And it's this idea, all of these aspects together for us, it creates equal opportunity for the whole world through equal access to this network, to Litecoin and Bitcoin. And so one of the questions that we get is like, okay, so you want to make use cases on Litecoin and Bitcoin. Well, what kind of use cases can you build? So to answer that, I want to just briefly touch on some characteristics of Litecoin that developers can leverage for their project. The first and primary use case for Litecoin and Bitcoin is payments, hands down. Okay, and it's the more people use it for payments, the more we are bringing people into a push economy instead of a pull economy. And we're still very early on in the payment stage. There needs to be more merchant processors. There needs to be node infrastructure that people need to create so that businesses can receive transactions at thousands per minute. And so we're still very early on. And then another aspect of Litecoin that people can use and leverage for their project is payment finality in minutes. So with Visa, you may not realize it because we're not the merchants, but it takes them 3 days to cash out and get that US dollar. But with Litecoin, you can get Litecoin in 2.5 minutes, and then you can spend that Litecoin to pay for domain services or whatever for your website. Another idea is permanence. So I talked with this VR gaming company, and they were like, you know what? We need something to tie an in-game event to a public ledger so that we can prove to people, hey, this actually happened in-game. And so you can do that with Litecoin. And Patrick talked about open timestamps before. And so you can tie an event to a transaction, and this whole concept is called open timestamps, and you can leave it on the public ledger. And when you do that, you prove, and anybody in the world can validate, oh yeah, that event happened in-game. When that person died, I received X amount of money. And the deeper the transaction gets into the blockchain, the more permanence it has. Next is this idea of non-custodial ownership. And so it's escrow services or betting sites with multi-sig wallet options. It's this idea you don't have to trust a third party to kind of hold your funds. Instead, you can create a multi-sig wallet so that, let's say you win in a fantasy football league. You can cash out by having everyone sign the transaction, and so nothing is held in escrow. Or even like a blackjack gambling site. Lastly, it's this idea of micropayments. Micropayments, like Litecoin transaction fees, are less than a cent. And so it's ideal for maybe like an in-game concept of where you can make tiny little purchases for every action. So we've talked about like characteristics of Litecoin, and it's good for us to kind of make this more concrete by looking at examples that are already using Litecoin in their projects. So what's an example of that? CoinDroids. How many of you guys have heard of CoinDroids? Okay, cool. That's awesome. I did a podcast with them for the Light podcast, and Josh, he and I talked about like why he chose to use Litecoin in his project. And you know what he said? There was 2 characteristics: payment finality in minutes, and also it's the cheaper transactions. If he were to build his system on Visa, the fees on his side would be too great in order to build this platform out. So how does CoinDroid work? CoinDroid they have 2.5 rounds, and in each round you can either attack, shield, or hide. And every round requires a Litecoin payment. And so if your transaction fee is less than a cent, you can totally do that. But with Visa, sometimes they charge like, you have to pay a whole dollar for every transaction, no matter if it's below a certain price point. And so that's just not feasible. It's not a good business model for him to use. And another aspect that he and I talked about that I had no idea of is this idea that he ties your Litecoin address to an account. And so instead of a lot of in-game purchases happen by you pay the game company and then they credit your account with some in-game currency, right? But with him, what he says is, no, you provide your own Litecoin address, and when you attack a droid and when you defeat it and it pays out Litecoin to you, it goes straight to your wallet instantly. And so I feel like he did a really great job of looking at the characteristics of Litecoin and building a game leveraging these properties. What else? CryptoMonsters.world. This was a new game, and it's kind of like CryptoKitties, but without a token. And I like it because, how this game works is, again, it's 2.5 minute rounds. You can take your crypto monster, you can evolve it by sending them into fights, and if they win that fight, your monster grows more powerful. Now, how he leverages the Litecoin blockchain is he takes an algorithm and he takes the most recent Litecoin block hash and then he creates a probability of success. So in the round, there's like maybe 6 monsters that are all fighting, and he uses the algorithm plus the Litecoin block hash, and he says, okay, this monster is going to win this round. Now, obviously, if your monster is more powerful, you have more chances to win that round and to come out on top. But the way that you structure the algo is that even the smaller, weaker monsters have a chance. It's a small chance, but they have a chance at winning that round. And so it's another great example of how these application builders are so creative at leveraging characteristics of Litecoin to build the future of sound money. Now, you might have a question, okay, so now where are we at? What kind of applications can I build if I'm interested using CoinMesh, your open source platform? Well, right now I would say build anything and everything. We're so early. It's so hard to tell like what application, what tool, what service is going to win and make a lot of revenue. But moving forward, in a few years down the line, I think that we need to build applications of value. Applications of value. So what does that mean? Let's take a step back and talk about what Litecoin is. Litecoin is an appreciative asset. And it's because it's deflationary in its supply. So what that means is 1 Litecoin today, the assumption is 1 year from now, it's going to have more purchasing power, right? So within this context, there are, from an Austrian perspective, there are 2 reasons why you would part with an appreciative asset for services. One, the first reason is need. You need to survive, you need to eat, you need to have a home. And so you're going to spend your Litecoin, your appreciative asset, on things that you need. But if we were to apply it to the crypto space overall, it goes to hardware wallets, to custodial solutions. People are not technical enough to handle their own Litecoin or Bitcoin. And so that's why they're filling a need. And so if you are building an application, we think, and your application fits a need, I think you've got a really good shot at sustaining and growing and doing really well. Like just look at Trezor and look at Ledger. These are 2 huge companies that are doing really well because they're fitting that need. The next is this idea of targeting low time preference behaviors. And so what does that mean? So let's say it takes me 1 Litecoin to go to the beach right now. But a year from now, it costs me 0.85 Litecoin. Now the question is, am I going to wait 1 year to go to the beach so that I can save 0.5 Litecoin, right? No way. I want to go to the beach now. I want to go with my friends. I want to enjoy the sun. And so it's this idea that I have a low time preference when it goes to the beach. And so if you want to build an application of value, I believe one primary area to focus is low time preference behavior. So to make that even more concrete, what's an example of that? Have you guys heard of Flappy Birds, the iPhone app? Yeah, like it was a huge craze, right? He never monetized it. But the basic premise is that you take a cell phone, you tap it, and then you go through obstacles and you try to get as far as you can, right? What if you were to monetize that? He would do it by saying every time you die in-game, you have to wait a minute. And then you got to put ad services in there. Or what I would say as a builder, I would say, okay, you give me $5 or $1, and you get 15 lives. And so you don't have to wait that whole minute. Do you see how you're targeting low time preference behaviors in that scenario? Because instead of waiting that full minute, I want to play it now. And so the last area that your application can address is leisure or entertainment. And so the idea is everybody needs a car. Everybody needs to drive around, or in LA, maybe in San Francisco or Chicago, maybe you don't. But the idea is, you can buy a 2000 Corolla, or you can buy a Lambo with Litecoin in 2 years, right? That's not a price prediction, please, yeah. Anyways, and so that's just the general idea of where you're targeting like leisure, high-end entertainment services and kind of things like that. So that's the end of our presentation. If you want to connect with us, that's our website, our Twitter. Please follow us. It'll help us out a lot. If you want to reach me, you can email me at contact@blockfuse.io. I'm super excited to announce that we are going to offer a free online class for application developers. This is going to be private, it's going to be hosted online, and you can you get one-on-one time with Patrick Walters. Patrick, do you want to talk about what you're going to go over in the class?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that it can be difficult to figure out where to get started. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to provide some video content and some learning content to help developers, and even some people maybe who aren't developers but they code in their free time. We want to give them some ideas for how they can get started and what it looks like and what a workflow looks like for a developer who's trying to build these applications. So if you know somebody, if you have friends or employees or colleagues, we really recommend reaching out, signing up. What we're going to do is we're going to basically start from scratch and go, hey, from 0 to here we have an application running, and let's add some features on top of it. And what it does is it kind of shows off how quick a proof of concept can be created from nothing to, hey, now we have features that you could take out to your friends or you could take out to businesses and basically go, hey, look, I've built this thing. Does this thing provide value? Does it provide a use case for you? And it really helps you to rapidly iterate on your application development.
So scan that QR code. It's going to take you to a Google form. Fill that information out, and I'll email you when we're going to have that class. And so hopefully at the end of this talk, you have a better idea of what kind of application you can build with Litecoin and Bitcoin, what characteristics you can leverage for your project. Thank you very much. So do we have time? How much time do we have? I see like 12 minutes on the counter. Cool. Let's do some Q&A. Do you guys have any questions for us about either CoinMesh or Litecoin or anything like that? Go ahead.
So why did you choose to build this platform on Litecoin instead of like Ethereum, which is like meant for development?
Yeah, good question. So this is going to be my opinion on it from a technical perspective. But what we look at is Ethereum. A lot of people are going off and building their own smart contracts, or they're generating their own tokens, and they're doing all these things in silos. They're not collaborating with each other. They're not learning from each other. They're basically competing with each other, right? And so what happens is you have a lot more developers, and not saying that they're medium to low skill, but you have a lot more opportunity to have these people with less skills in what they're doing building these applications. They're not leveraging community resources, right? And so you have the opportunity for bugs like with, not to highlight some, but you have some wallet issues where people have lost funds with Ethereum. And it's very easy for that to happen when people are building things but they don't fully understand what they're building yet, right? And so one of the things that we believe that you can do is by using public blockchains, by using Litecoin and Bitcoin, you can, and leveraging a community-built set of shared libraries, you can actually have a lot more security because there's less of a chance for you to screw up when so many other people are also using these and building on these same libraries. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and also one more thing is that yes, Ethereum, they do a great job at developing their developer community, right? That is pretty good. But that's what, just because Litecoin doesn't have that now doesn't mean that they can't have it in the future. And that's what we want to build.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Could you, Peter, could you help with running? Thank you.
And you guys got to come up with questions, or you're going to hear us saying you really don't want to hear that. So.
How do you think the Lightning Network will improve development on Litecoin and, well, I guess Litecoin, but also Bitcoin?
Yeah, so Lightning Network is a scaling solution, and so what it does, it creates transactions off-chain, and so you can make payments without having it bloat the blockchain. And so for me personally, it's still early, but what's really encouraging is that Chaincode Labs, they're offering residency programs for Lightning Network app developers, right? And so the idea is, and if you look at their course, they say you don't have to be a Bitcoin protocol dev to take our residency. And so the idea is like, okay, you can be an app developer. You don't need in-depth knowledge about the Lightning Network, about how it works. You just need a general concept and you can leverage it for your project. But, I don't know, can we talk about LND?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, and so I have to check with him because he's the CTO. We're working on adding Lightning Network implementation on CoinMesh. So it's pretty hard to make sure that your configuration files for LND and Litecoin are the same. We're going to take care of all of that. And so literally you can set up a node in a matter of minutes in 6 steps, and then you as an app developer, you can get started instantly in minutes. And I'm very excited about the potential and the amount of growth that we can bring to the ecosystem.
Yeah, and one thing, kind of to answer your question from another angle, you mentioned how can the Lightning Network actually bring benefit through application development, right? And one of the things that you'll see, I think, is currently Litecoin and Bitcoin, they have great use cases when you have that time for, everyone wants to make the analogy of buying a coffee, right? Well, take buying the coffee out of it. Let's say that you had a network of micropayments that you wanted to make from either content authorship or whatever else it is, right? You have some way that you want to monetize people and you want to pay them instantly for their work. And these people are always going to be working together also, right? So perhaps we're doing some contract work and you and I are working together on this project, but we want to divvy up the funds and make payments and things like that. We know we're going to be working together. We can open channels with each other. We don't even have to open channels with each other, but applications can be built where people that are going to be grouped together have the opportunity to move funds between each other really simply and really easily. And I think there's a lot of use cases there as well.
And if you use CoinMesh to build your Lightning Network app, you can share that with anybody else who has CoinMesh. And it's super easy, super portable. You just mount it on the project.
Just one more question about the nodes and CoinMesh hosting the nodes. Is that yeah, I guess
we actually don't host your nodes. We don't want to be in the business of offering a third-party API. CoinMesh is open source. It runs on your hardware. It runs in the cloud. It runs wherever you want it. But we don't charge a service fee or anything else for providing those APIs.
Hi, a general new question is Lightning Network and I guess could you speak about a Lightning Network and Bitcoin? Are they going to stay primarily currency oriented, and is the future, or if you want to talk more about Litecoin in that sense? So is Litecoin going to move towards adding smart contract capabilities in the future, or is like the focus on currencies?
Okay, so your question is like, what future do we see for Litecoin and Bitcoin and Lightning Network?
No.
Sorry.
Is Litecoin and Litecoin is going to start to add smart contract capabilities on top, or is it going to really just kill the payment space?
Yeah. Okay. So on day one, Diego Gutierrez from Rootstock came in, and what that does, and he talked about sidechains. And so Rootstock is it's a sidechain. It's you peg one LTC for one smart LTC. They're two separate blockchains. And on smart LTC, that offers Ethereum-like smart contract capability. And the best part is that it moves all the danger, all the bloat onto a separate blockchain, and it doesn't keep it on Litecoin. And so smart contracts, you can do it once RSK is implemented onto Litecoin. But we also have Lightning Network on Litecoin too, and so that's the payment solution. And I actually just did a podcast with him yesterday, the Live podcast. This is my second plug. Please check it out. Yeah, I did an in-depth interview with him about the security behind sidechains and RSK, and he did a really good job answering those things. So check it out.
Yeah, and kind of to follow up too, what you traditionally think of as a smart contract now, that's available. You can build these things on top of Litecoin and Bitcoin currently. It's just sometimes there's some just different interfaces, I guess, that you would call them, like Rootstock, that make it even easier and that make it more structured. So a lot of those capabilities, I think, are already available.
So with building applications on top of Bitcoin and Litecoin, but we'll just talk about Litecoin here. Do you guys personally want to see it, develop into something where there's tons of different applications, or do you think it's more important to focus on financial applications?
Go ahead, go first.
Anything. I think at least it would be so cool if CoinMesh was used to build a wide variety of applications for Litecoin and Bitcoin. And ultimately, it's like the market will decide, if this tool gains traction, then yeah, that will go in that direction. But we're not going to dictate anything. It's an open source project, so whatever developer comes to CoinMesh and whatever application he wants to build, he can do it. And it'll be really interesting to see how the industry moves forward, whether it'll just be payment focused, or it'll be something like CoinDroids or Crypto Monsters, where it's more like application game based type of stuff.
Yeah, and so to kind of add on, just with my personal opinion on that, I think one of the things that really interests me about making this technology open source and opening this up to as many people as possible through things like documentation translation, making the UI work for all, different, as many languages as we can possibly support, is personally, my goal is that somebody in an underdeveloped country that wants to have their own business, they should be able to build something where they can receive money, pay money, and they should be able to be their own entrepreneur, right? Right now, it's really easy if you live in San Francisco to go out and meet a lot of like-minded people and start a business. It's not so easy in underdeveloped countries. But if we can enable them to build these things and build these technologies, and that those applications or communities or whatever grow organically, I think it's ambitious, but I think that's where the real awakening would happen, is when we're not so dependent on a few smaller or a few larger fintech companies.
Any more questions?
Got two.
All right.
I think it's really great that you guys are focusing on the platform tools. It's, as Thoreau said, it separates us from the lower life forms, the ability to create and use tools. One of the aspects I'm seeing is that we're building this platform for blockchain. There's a lot of efforts like Quorum coming out of JP Morgan, and of course Hyperledger and IBM, work that they're doing. I'm a little concerned when I see new languages just for smart contracts. Trying to create Turing complete, but trying to create safety, on-chain, off-chain, dealing with security issues. I'm looking for that holistic vision of, let's take a Google or a Microsoft or any of these other kind of companies that build platform tooling for developer community. Is that going to be CoinMesh? Are you going to be that platform tooling company? Is that your goal? And the next question about that, if you don't mind me asking.
Hit me, baby. Let's go.
There's a lot of standards. I've been in this business for a long time. Microsoft 10 years.
Yeah.
Right? Created a product called BizTalk so that businesses didn't have to write code to implement their business logic. Right? We defined a standard called BEPL and BPMN. So you can define a smart contract and basically an XML contract. And then you had an execution engine that would just execute it. So no matter what your business was, no matter what your logic was, it uses a standard notation and then a very generic execution engine to execute it. Now I envision a master node just being a BPE, the business process execution engine. And then you can have your contracts defined in a standard notation. I mean, this is an industry ISO standard now, and a lot of tool developers have WYSIWYG drag and drop capability to output this. But I don't see that level of mature thinking yet here in this space. How do we cross that chasm so you don't have to be a rocket scientist writing code to try to figure out how to implement your business logic?
You want to take the first and take the second?
Okay, so, sorry, very shortly, what was your first question again? I was trying.
Are you that company?
Yes. We want to be an industry standard. I think the more people use CoinMesh and build tooling services, we want to become the industry standard. And you know what the hard part is that, like, if you're trying to get into Litecoin and Bitcoin development, you're looking through old documentation, like maybe 6 months old. That's too late because this space just rapidly develops so fast. But we're very up to date with all the most recent documentations, all the most recent releases, and we automate that process for you, right? And so you don't have to deal with that. Do you want to talk about the second question?
Yeah, and so I'll try to be kind of brief, but in a nutshell, your question was how do we make it so that these things can be not scripted, but how can we use more of like a
already established standards.
Exactly.
Right,
exactly.
so that a business guy can walk up and say, "This is my business logic."
Exactly.
Right, and not have to hire a big shop of developers.
To
right?
start from scratch and build that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we, like I said, we really want to promote is an open source community of people contributing to these libraries. And libraries should be very focused on what they do, and that way they're highly reusable. And what that does is it means that I have the security of knowing when I use this library, I already have a lot of peer reviewers who have used it, and I already have the ability to add some feature to my application without having to do a bunch of research. Not saying don't do research, but and by doing that, what we really enable is kind of like what you're talking about, right? I want to be able to fit these pieces together to do some workflow. And in the long term, what we really want to do is try to incentivize developers through some sort of payment system that we're still talking about to be able to continue to contribute to these libraries. And that way things like what you're talking about are possible, right? If I know that a lot of people are getting into the space, there's a lot of people using CoinMesh, I, as a developer, may want to go build a WYSIWYG where I do create these workflows, right? And I want to do it on top of CoinMesh because then it opens my product up to a lot of developers who are also trying to get into the same space. And so long term, that's definitely part of our vision. We don't really have an exact flow diagram where you can bring things in, but it's possible. It's not impossible. So.
Cool. All right, it looks like we're out of time. This has been super fun. Thank you guys for asking such great questions and listening. Yeah. I'll see you next time.
We are breaking for lunch now, so if you all wanted to head out and grab something to eat, I believe lunch is not provided today by the venue, but there are lots of restaurants around, even across the street at the the Holiday Inn, there's a restaurant there, so go and find something to eat, and we are coming back here at 12:20 and starting again. So enjoy your lunch break, and we'll see you in a bit.
Had McDonald's.
McDonald's. Hey man, what's up, man? How's it going? I follow you on YouTube, man.
Really?
Yep.
Come on the live stream right now. What's your name?
Daniel.
Daniel?
Yeah.
Good name. We got a subscriber right here, Daniel.
What's up, guys?
That is Poseidon Lou, for everybody wondering. And then we got Drew Blood here. We got the whole crew, baby.
Where's the camera?
The camera's right there. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, man. Appreciate it.
Gonna be around today?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll catch up.
Nice to meet you, man.
Poseidon Lou. Can everybody? Shoes. Poseidon Lou. Everybody might remember the live stream the other day. Yeah, you got them too. Look at that. So sweet, man. All right, we'll be back live in a little bit. Thanks for watching. God bless.